So I don't know exactly where all this is going with the project and the channel or anything like that, but my goal, my heart is to just go and help people where we can, to continue to build relationships with those people, and if we can help in any way to facilitate the vision that they have to help people, well, man, I'm on board for that. And hopefully you guys will get to see some of the things that transpire from us helping people while they help other people, or people helping us while we help other people, and it just be a very uplifting and positive experience for everyone. Whether this does any good or not, it's been interesting. Alright, we're on our way to go see Justin, to go pick up the scale, get it back to the shop. I really enjoy getting to hang out with Justin. I don't know how much time we're going to have. We may just have to get in and get out depending on what his work schedule's like today. I know his training schedule changes pretty dramatically from day to day, but he said we had time to sneak in and get the scale. So I'm excited for you guys to get to meet Justin, get to see Justin, and just hang out with him. So my hope is that at some point you'll get to hear his vision for the company, what he does, the heart he has for the people that he gets to work for. I'm excited to just get to go and help him out. Justin and I have spent a lot of time together. He's a very good friend. We spent time together in school and outside of school, and he's, well, don't tell him, but he's one of my favorite people. Back to the shop, all safe and sound, nothing broken. As you can see, scale is not reading anywhere near close to zero. We've looked online, can't find schematics, there's no parts for this thing. Morris Scales is right here locally out of Portland, and they've been out of business for quite some time. So we're just going to flip it over, check it out, and see if we can figure out what's going on. Alright, well, we've got the scale laid down, so let's take a look at how this thing is supposed to function. We've got the upper plate here. Right, and that's connected to this arm here. And as this pushes down, it connects these two arms, and this arm runs up and controls the actual scale head in the reading. So the piece that got lost was supposed to go in between the two arms. Part of the problem with this is it's so thin. So as the scale tries to read, this thing can move all over the place, and there's a huge lack of consistency. Take this thing apart a little further here. So my guess would be that the part that was lost would have been shaped more like this one, except for that there would have been a plate like this on top and on bottom. So as these two rode together, they would have been a plate on top and bottom, so that as you stepped on the scale and it lowered this arm down, the weight would be distributed evenly and the scale would read consistent. So what we need to try to do is recreate something like this. The problem is, like we discussed, is you can't buy parts for this. So we're going to go to the hardware store and see what we can scrounge up to make something to make this work. So we'll be back. So here's some of the solutions we've come up with. We got rid of the hardware store ideas like we talked about in the last explanation. But we wanted to try to fix this with just some stuff we could find at the hardware store. This was just a lot simpler to stick this on the lathe, face it off. And basically do the same thing without trying to weld all of these pieces together. We can TIG weld these together and create a lot more work for ourselves. We also gave up on the collar sleeve. The shaft collar sleeve here, I'm hoping to be able to smash it and elongate it. Just because trying to squish this, I'm almost positive it would have broke across the threads there. So this will be the first trial as far as seeing if it will work in the scale. I did go ahead and I built what I think would be the factory piece for this. So like we explained earlier, it's basically this piece, but both sides. So it'll have a cradle on each side, and then that'll allow the scale to ride evenly. So we're going to try both of these, see how they work, and go from there. So we're going to start by trying the first of the two solutions here. Again, this is, like I said, I thought this was a pretty good concept, but the problem is there just wasn't enough surface for the two arms to engage on. And so we're going to try this one, see how it does. I don't think it's going to be as accurate as the factory piece, but it'll be a fun experiment nonetheless. So let's get this thing put back together here. We'll see what it does. So we've got the scale back together, and it actually feels pretty good. It's reading a couple of pounds off just stationary here, and that may be because the ring that we made is thicker and heavier than the factory piece, which may be causing it to read off slightly. Yeah, that's definitely wrong. I'm not that fat, but not too bad from both sides. So we'll put the other factory piece in we made and see if that works any better. Hopefully you can see the scale is reading right at 0. So I'm excited to see. Hopefully I won't be so fat this time. Perfect, right there. Feels good on the front. That looks like it is absolutely successful. All right, so scale's working great. We're gonna head off to Justin's in the morning. It's all loaded up. Morning. All right, so, and we're back.
Sorry,
Go.
I'm trying to come down off that.
I know, like my cheeks hurt. Like the good thing is I'll be extra smiley in this video,
Right.
Until Justin.
Now I feel awkward. So it's like, that kind of thing happens to me all the time. Was I fine 5 minutes later? Perfectly fine.
So how did the scale get broken? Because it worked at your last place, right?
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is I actually don't know. We had moved it, I think we just used a U-Haul van, moved it from Oregon City to here, and at some point, when we set it back down, looked over and it was reading, I want to say like 375, it was back.
So, just give us a kind of what you use the scale for?
So yeah, for us, it's one of the three most important tools that we use. We kind of triangulate between three things depending on what level of access somebody has to the other two financially. So we'll use a scale. Really, weighing every single day isn't super necessary, but for some people, it's their favorite way to connect with whether they're making progress consistently.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I want to see what they weigh once a week, and then look at that as that goes to 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and see if we see trends and what we should expect. The other thing that we use is called NARMR. So we're looking at somebody's metabolic rate, and the simplest way of looking at that is how many calories do you need to stay the same? And if we see that number, which is individual to you and to me, we could say, hey, if we're going to add calories and reduce movement, you're going to slowly trend up.
Right.
If you increase movement and reduce calories, you're slowly going to trend down. And it's a good way for us to work with the scale to consistently reach your goal. And then the final one would be a DEXA scan, which is just the highest form of knowing what your body fat percentage is, and then also what kind of fat that you have stored in what kind of areas, and how much muscle you've put on or haven't put on. And so we'll use all three of those to kind of give a great picture of what your demand is. And this is the easiest thing that we can use on a daily level to say, hey, are we trending towards our goals? And we can use those other tools to help us over time kind of triangulate what is outside of maybe just a fluctuation from water or a big meal or all those kinds of different things. So this is one of the three more important keys.
Right. So does this particular tool, does it trigger much of a fear response for very many people?
Yeah. It's always funny when you see somebody come in and I say, okay, let's pop on the scale, and they are good with it. Like, there's no anxiety, there's no sense of trepidation, they don't kind of look at it like it's an enemy and start stalking it back and forth. For the most part, people look at it and they feel a massive sense of every thought they've ever had about working out or eating correctly that they didn't act on, that moment it flashes before their eyes and they don't want to do it. But my big thing is, like, listen, when you stand on the scale, all this is doing is giving a number to what I see and you see when you look in the mirror. And if you make this a moral judgment, and the higher it goes this way, the worse of a person you apparently are to yourself, or the least successful you are, and the more it goes this way, the more successful, the better you are, you're doing all of this wrong. So you have to really realize that that number is just representative of where you're at in the most biological sense in terms of weight. That's it. It can't speak about who you are, how big of a failure you are in the way that you want it to. So we try and do a lot of taking the morality part out of food and goods and bads and making it about more advantageous and getting closer and further away from your goal, because it can really mess people up.
So how does the number on the scale, how do people equate that to, like, their self-worth and their mental, how they process some of that?
Somebody with a healthy relationship to food and their own body weight, not at all. It's a representation of, in my opinion, for most people, dedication and consistency. But for everybody else, it's a guilt and shame game, and most of that stuff isolates people. It turns them away from their goals. It turns them away from community. It turns them away from accountability. And the scale is just almost like looking at somebody else in the eye and having to admit what you have or haven't done. And so they don't look at it. I think it's funny. They'll look at here, but they don't want to look at this. So it is an interesting sense of almost like a mirror, or looking at somebody else's eyes.
Right. So it brings a certain level of accountability to people who are have trepidation about getting on the scale. It's scary.
Yeah, and they don't want it to be.
Right. It doesn't need to be.
It does not need to be at all. It's a tool that you should use in your tool belt. It's not something that should, like the Eye of Sauron, sit there, stare down at you, and make you cower. That's the wrong way of going about it.